Namaste student, Kushro Vidya. I am JBN Dr. Meenakshi Maheshwari, Assistant Professor in Management Department in Jayoti Vidhyapeeth, Women's University, Jaipur. In today's session, we are going about advertising and sales promotion. In this subject, our topic is social, ethical and regulative aspect of advertisement. So let's start about our topic. Socio-ethical aspect of advertising is concerned with good and bad with reference to a particular culture at a given point of time. It represents a set of moral principles and values. Socio-ethical advertising can shift the demand curve to the right. Unethical can shift the demand curve of a firm to the left. Socio-ethical advertising can shift the demand curve to the right, and unethical can shift the demand curve of a firm to the left. Economist perspective regarding the effect of advertising follow two bases school of thought: the advertising equals market power model and the advertising equal information model. Arguments consistent with each perspective were considered in analyzing the economic effect. Learn about social, economical and ethical aspect of advertising. Additionally, learn about the social perspective, economic importance and criticism, and social the positive development perspective. Aspect of advertising: social, economical, ethical aspect and criticism and other aspect of advertising as a social aspect. The criticism that most promotional messages are tasteless and that promotion contributes nothing to society's well-being. Sometimes ignore the fact that there is no commonly accepted set of standards or priorities within our social framework. We live in a mixed economy with differing needs, wants, and aspirations. What is tasteless to one group may be quite satisfactory for another. An advertising strategy is concerned with an averaging problem that aspects many of its criticism. The one generally accepted standard in a society like ours is freedom of choice for the consumer. Customer buying decision will eventually determine what is an acceptable in the market. Advertising has become an important factor in the campaign to achieve such societal oriented objective as the discontinuance of smoking, family planning, physical fitness, and the elimination of abuse, prohibition of drinking, etc. Advertising perform an informative and educative task, and that is why it is extremely important practice in the functioning of modern Indian society. A social perspective on advertising. Critics attribute an awesome ability to advertising to persuade millions of Indians to do almost anything. Advertising has been accused of causing, either directly or indirectly. First one is an escalation in the national crime rate. Second is an increase in communal ratios. Next is a decline in the respect for leadership of every kind. Next is the employment of strategies for the manipulation of children. Next is the use of sub-threshold effects to sleep message past our conscious guard. Next is a deliberate sale of products for their status enhancement value. Next, illogical irrational loyalties. Next is the explanation of our debates, sexual sensitivities. Next is the application of the inside of depth selling of policy. Advertising is at once a scapegoat and imperfect social institutions and a force of impardable proportions. We have every right to expect such a force to act in a fully responsible manner. We have a responsibility to understand the inherent imperfection of our commercial advertising system. There are essential three challenges to advertising. First one, advertising a challenge on the aesthetic front. The bad taste argument exemplify this link of attack. Second, advertising is challenge on the moral front. The charge here range from exploitation of sex of those creating bonds. Next, third, advertising is challenge on the economic front. Its effect on price, its influence on the rigor of competition, in short, its effect on the allocation of scarce resources. It is difficult to define good taste. It would be impossible to legislate for it. Good taste is what you and I and very few others possess, yet there are commercial use of the mass media. There are repugnant to the majority concept of good taste. The advertising industry should to some extent attempt to regulate itself to ensure against such abuse. Each of the three components of the advertising industry is sponsor, agency and media has established the means through which standard of taste may be controlled. Advertising and sponsor may be regulated by a company code of ethics as well as the industrial code developed by an association of firms. Note that these codes are self-imposed and enter into without compulsion or threat of penalties. Advertisements in India are becoming more and more exaggerated as products tend to label out in performance. To achieve competitive advantage, advertising magnifies unimportant differences, resort to clever, tricky product promises, and claim more and more unbelievable benefits. As a result, consumers believe in the honesty and sincerity of an advertising message, and the value of that message in selling the product has been heavily discounted. Therefore, a concern should have the following rules of advertising conduct. First one is an advertisement should not claim or promise by implication any product, performance or characteristic which is not fully supported by laboratory research, consumer research or similar factual information. Advertising must not make use of the legal but dishonest device by which display promises are legally discounted in fine time. In TV commercial, visual demonstrations should be the real ones within the time limits of the commercial. Next is comparative claim for the products must be clearly supported by research, laboratory or consumer test of the competitor's product. Such tests should not be made against inferior brand but against the best competitive product on the market. Advertising agencies in India therefore should not now place an advertisement which contain first one is false or misleading statement or exaggeration visual or verbal. Second is testimonial, which do not reflect the real choice of a component witness. Next is price claim, which are misleading. Next is claims which are insufficient supported or which distort the true meaning or practical application of a statement made by a professional or scientific authority. Next is comparison, which unfairly disparage a competitive product or service. Next is statement suggestion or picture offensive to public taste. There are areas in advertising which are subject to interpretation and judgment. Taste is subjective and many even vary from time to time and individual to individual. The frequency of seeing or hearing advertising message will necessarily vary greatly from person to person. However, an advertiser should discourage the use of advertising which is in poor or questionable taste or which is deliberately irritating in its content, presentation, or excessive repetition. It is of course possible to argue that these quotes and other efforts toward self-regulation within the advertising industry are ineffectual and are token reform measure, and that no real change has indeed been made. But the professional element in the advertising fraternity are sincere. They are, as they themselves admit, selfishly concerned and fully aware of the likely consequence of grossly irresponsible commercial use of the mass media. As to the alleged moral transgressions of advertising, more standards are set in a collective way. There is no single, well defined moral codes. There are many such codes. The moral range might run from outright prudishness to the free everything philosophy. In one sense, advertising function within the moral constraints imposed by society and not within those that are imposed by most prudish element with that society, all of which does not mean that some objectionable movie advertisement should be condemned, but for those who believe that it is morally wrong, that advertising must pursue that it is wrong for advertising to develop new wants. There is an even more emphatic answer. For many years, critics have distinguished between economic wants and economic needs. To satisfy an economic need has been viewed as a worthy cause. To satisfy a want has been considered as much less worthy. The fact that wants can be synthesized by advertising, catalyzed by salesmanship, and shaped by a discreet manipulation of the pursuers indicates that they are not very urgent. A man who is hungry need never be told of his need for food. If he is inspired by his appetite, he is immune to the influence to others. Others become effective only with those who are so far removed from physical want then that they do not really know that they want. In this statement alone, men are open to persuasion. The manipulation of wants become a moral question because it is illustrated interface with the process of free choice. It invents the inner sanctum of the mass mind and prevents clear thinking. But advertising is designed to predispose its reader to a favorable consideration of its sponsor and its product. In this topic, asked in the examination questions define social, ethical and regulatory aspect of advertising. Thank you. This session is powered by Jayoti Vidhyapeeth Women's University, Jaipur. In this topic, any question, any queries, we will discuss problem solving. Thank you.